We have a small class today for graduation and soccer games, so that's okay. They'll watch later, but we'll still get into this and pull all the good meat out that was in here. I read through some of these a couple different times and even had to go back and look at what was suggested as homework and process that a few times, decide if I was ready to dig into some of that myself. So let's just open in a word of prayer. Lord, thank you for this beautiful spring-like weather that we have craved here in our little northeastern corner of Indiana, because I assure you, last week we thought it was winter again, and it was trying to attack. So we will appreciate today and the sunshine, the warmth, hopefully warmer winds, and the fact that we don't have parkas on and wool hats at a soccer game today. Lord, help us to dig into today's discussion. It certainly hits on some sensitive subjects and things that we all experience and probably on a daily basis, at least one or two of them have the potential of rising up. So Lord, we just ask for guidance today. Ask that the material here gives some incredible aha moments so that the way we react to these situations can be lessened and stress and weight on our shoulders can be lifted. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. So Monster Track 6, we didn't get to last week because the other two were pretty involved. And this one was pretty big as far as button pushing. So we pushed that on into this week's reading. And I think it paired well with the other two tracks that followed, with the all or nothing and the compulsion. And that, yeah, I just think they grouped well together. So before I make any points, did anybody have something they wanted to offer or that jumped out right at the beginning?
I think we live in a world of buttons right now.
Oh.
With all of the trigger language and the kind of carefulness around what triggers people, etc. I think I don't want to be insensitive to people that are experiencing PTSD, etc. But at the same time, as always, when we tend to pendulum too far in one direction, and so I feel like there is such that people have begun to believe that they have a right never to be offended, so they don't question their offense at all. As to, does that make sense?
Yes. Yes. Why did that offend me? No, they have a right to their offense, and
they just say you offended me, and that's not okay. And that's I think that's a big problem in our world right now.
Yes, a hypersensitivity to button pushing, that they are to never be offended by anyone, and then when you are offended, you go and unfriend anyone and everyone associated with that person. They are now your enemy. Yeah. And the world knows about it. So absolutely, we have become very hypersensitive to button pushing and pushing other buttons or trying not to. There's a great book. I have not read it in detail, but I have it. It just came in the mail, by Brant Hansen. He is... are they called DJs anymore? I don't know what you call them. Anyway, he's got a radio show on WBCL, I think, or Star 88. I think it's Star 88. But he has Asperger's, but he also has a very successful career on the radio. Mm-hmm. And he writes Bible studies. I believe he might even be a pastor. And he wrote a book called Unoffendable.
Mm-hmm.
And then he went back and wrote an expanded version of it and turned it into a Bible study, so you can get the whole kit and caboodle. And so I just ordered that book. He's talked about it at least for a year now when I hear him on the radio. And I always think that would be a great book to read and pass along to people that tend to have easily triggered buttons. But yeah, great resource, I think. Unoffendable by Brant Hansen. So, and then my sister this week sent me, because I had my buttons pushed this week, and I called her so that I could just explode and let her help me walk it through. And she sent me one of those reels, and it was this girl saying, "Today I am practicing the word okay. When you say something that I really want to," and then like this explosion of expletives come out of her mouth. And she goes, "Instead, I'm just going to say, okay, okay, okay." And just let it settle for a little bit and think about it before she does the other. I told her, I said, "Was that for me that I need to practice?" Because actually my sister can be quite that person. She'll come in and clean clocks and then put it all back together later. But I said, some days I feel like I should actually practice the other. That I say okay too much or say nothing and just exit a situation instead of say what I really feel or think about it at the time. And she goes, "Well, that's fair too. Maybe you should practice the other." But so it was definitely a week of some button pushing. I have a note. Let's see, the bottom of page 142. So she talks about there's innocent attacks and there are deliberate attacks. When someone pushes a button and it was completely unintentional, and how you react. Oh, she even uses the word hypersensitive. I didn't even recall that in here. I threw that one out there. So, the button pusher never had an ill intent. It's just that our own mental bloodhounds are out at work, and they're bringing you all this evidence, and it causes that stirring inside, that negative energy. I get a sick feeling in my stomach, and I can feel my blood pressure rise. I can feel my jaw tighten. Sometimes my fists clenching, what I do right here, this, I'll be sitting with them in my lap, and I can just feel all of that take place when my buttons are being pushed, whether they were intentional or not. She talks about when she can step outside of that, when it's been an innocent attack, just 100% of the time they were perceived injuries, and the button pusher didn't mean it. They probably aren't even aware of how it's making you feel internally, and especially if you are at all good at, like Stonewall Jackson, not letting them see everything that's going on internally while the conversation is taking place and your buttons are being pushed. And then she talks about deliberate attacks, where when someone is upset with you and you're having a discussion, and maybe their button is already pushed and their prefrontal cortex has shut down and they aren't using their best logic or reasoning, and then the things that they're saying in turn are coming out and, on all attack. They are just full on. They're going to make sure you know how they're feeling. And so it just creates a really deep wound. And anyway, she says that the solution is to create a new interpretation. She goes more in detail in this in chapter 6, which we're not too far off from. The quick answer is not necessarily easy. It's to employ our prefrontal cortex to tell ourselves a new story about the person who just hurt us. And something that she says that's really key is that hurt people hurt people. When someone is hurting, and we know that, we've said that so many times in our own conversations, that they are hurt and they're operating out of that hurt, and all they know how to do is to hurt back. And being able to step outside of that, even when you're being hurt and being hurt deliberately, and that's a tough thing to do. And I can remember my buttons getting pushed, oh my goodness, how many years back would it have been? 7 or 8 years ago with my boys. We were trying to get out the door for school, and I don't even remember the content of the conversation. All I know is that it revolved around their dad, and they'd been drug into a conversation that was a very adult conversation that wasn't any of their business. It didn't have to do with them, but that was something their dad was really good at doing, was dragging them in and saying things that I was doing. And as we were in the car driving, and the boys are just continuing this conversation that I have asked for them to stop and that we could pick it up later. This wasn't the best time. We didn't even have enough time to discuss it. We needed to get to school. We're now going to be in a car. I can't look at them. I can't sit them down and really concentrate. I have to drive. And I cannot recall what they said, but I remember yelling, "Your dad is just a monster." Because what they were saying was just the opposite, all the horrible things I've ever done as a parent, like make them take vitamins, and that they were gummy vitamins, and they hated gummy things, and that I made them take them. And the list, it was ridiculous, but it was going on and on. And so I was definitely being, the object of their anger of so many things. And so, but I can also remember that as I was screaming that in my car driving, I felt like I was out here observing all that in an out-of-body experience, just watching myself lose control and yell at my 2 little boys that were in grade school and middle school that their dad was a monster. And as soon as that came out of my mouth, I can just remember how horrified I was that I said that about their dad. And couldn't take it back. I mean, I could apologize, but it was out. And, that was a pretty strong word to use for little kids, that their dad was a monster. What did that mean? But yeah, they were definitely intentionally pushing buttons because they were angry with me over something they couldn't understand. And it was a discussion that we couldn't even have at that time. And I did not handle that well. My buttons were certainly pushed. And when I think and thought about it at the time, it all goes back to that core monster of mine of not having value, that I don't bring value to things. So I did not have value in that relationship. My boys had made it very clear, I am not valuable to them. And boy, did that trigger a button. So, that was not a pleasant day, not one that I'm very proud of. So, but we have moved on since. But there's who is it that said that in here? Did you catch the, I can choose what meaning I give their actions? When we tell a different story, when, she talks about, we don't know what their monster is that they're dealing with. We don't know what their triggers are. But we can step away from that and tell ourselves a different story about it. And when we feel our buttons being pushed, when you feel that internal angst and that anxiety welling up, that anger welling up, that fight feeling, that's the time to step out and say, why, what is going on right here? Why did that make me want to punch them in the face? That's what she says at the bottom of the page. Why is that? Why do you want to punch them right now? If you've ever been on the phone, I've certainly expressed that one. I'd love to just pull them right on through the phone and wrap the cord. This is when there were corded phones, on long cord,
Yes.
right around the neck,
Yeah.
tightly. Yeah. Yeah. Ever been there before? Ever felt that? So now she makes a note in here, and that's something we certainly need to address. There's button pushing, and there's arguments that don't go well, and poor communication and poor arguing. And arguing is certainly a skill. And then there's a point, it's just abusive. It's emotional abuse, it's verbal abuse, it is just abusive. And there have to be boundaries within that. And that is different than just having your button pushed or being hypersensitive to something. So please be aware of that as well. And get professional help. Seek out counseling. Have someone help you process. Have someone help you to identify, is this emotional abuse? Oftentimes it's like, how do you cook a frog in a, do you throw them in the pot of boiling water, or you put them in the water and you slowly turn it up? Oftentimes abuse starts that way. It's just little things here and there that you blow off and don't give much account to, and then it gets more and more and more, and before you realize it, you are deep in it, and you don't even realize that what you're going through is wrong and is abusive and needs counseling. So go to someone in that case. Ask someone you can trust, or just contact a therapist and say, I don't know, what I'm experiencing is abuse, but I need someone that can tell me and work through that. So we certainly are not saying, oh, you just are, hypersensitive. And we started off with that this morning about some people are. And in this world, it is such a litigious world anymore. You can sue over everything. You can just blast everything out on social media, and you can just really tear people down anymore. And some are super sensitive to it, because we've also, on the flip side, have so many labels of emotional disorders anymore that we can hide behind that. And, oh, because of this, you can't say these things around me, and you have to just always walk on eggshells around me and be super careful to not upset me. And we no longer take the responsibility for our own emotions and managing our own business. So it's a fine line. Get some help on trying to sort it out if you're not sure where you are in that. Because it needs dealt with either way. If you suffer PTSD, it needs dealt with. If you are being abused, it needs dealt with. If you're just hypersensitive, it needs dealt with. All the way around, it needs dealt with in one way or another. So,
yeah, I think that's all the more reason for us to be curious about these responses that happen in us.
Right.
It's like, well, I'm really angry about this. That really, that I definitely had a button pushed. And it's only when we're away from the moment that, and our prefrontal cortex is actually functioning again,
yes.
that we can look back and ask the important questions. Was this abuse? Absolutely needs to be one of those questions. Like, was what happened just me being sensitive, or is this person, toxic to me? So that's the. But if we don't ever do that examination, we won't find out one way or the other.
Right. We won't. And you don't have to ask everyone in your circle, because then that's more just venting and exploiting and yes, absolutely gossip. That's not what we're saying either. Everybody needs to have that one person they know they can trust with information and can objectively sound back to you what you're saying to them. And if you don't have that one person, then you have to pay someone. So you'll have to get the therapist and pay someone to be that one person for you. Because not everybody does. Maybe you've just had yourself in such a spot with untrustworthy people, and that is so unfortunate. But that is also a case. There are people out there that really don't have that one grounded person that they can go to, and not just go to, and be able to say whatever is on your mind, but also know that whoever it is that's the subject of your conversation at the time, the person you're telling it to will never hold judgment against the one you're discussing. That they can truly just talk about the situation and what is surrounding it, and remember that that other person involved that's not present in the conversation is a valued person loved by God that operates in their own dysfunction as well, with their own button pushers and own monsters, and that will always still see them as a person value of love, compassion, and friendship, that it does not affect that relationship. And that's a hard person to find. It's hard to find someone that you can truly go to and trust to be able to say whatever you want to say about another person, and they won't see them in any different light. They will still treat them the same that they always treat them. That is a tough thing to search out and to be able to do that. And so then if you just don't have a person, then yeah, it's going to take your $30 or $35 copay and however many visits your insurance allows to go find that person that, you know, would have that sense of confidentiality and that grounded ability to completely objectively look at a situation. So I am not above paying a copay for stuff like that. I have certainly done it and just literally gone in and said, I need someone to tell me if I am just way off base here, because I feel like I'm crazy or everyone else thinks I am, but yet in my mind I feel like what I'm saying or feeling is right.
Yeah.
So I've been there. Okay, she also made a great point too about the difference between being annoyed and your button really being pushed. And maybe that's where that hypersensitive comes in. You know, were you just annoyed? Were their actions annoying? What they had on that day was annoying? What music they were listening to, was it just an annoyance? When they tried to talk to you, did they pick a poor time? Were you already immersed in something else at the moment and they were wanting your attention and you couldn't shift gears? Or did you really have a button pushed? And when your button is pushed, it's intense. It is intense. That fight or flight kicks in. And mine kicked in. I literally left a situation this week. Got up, walked out, and got in my car and called my sister. And then it was, then she sends me that little, learn to say okay. I said nothing because what I wanted to say was a whole lot. So that's when you know you've had a button pushed. And again, yeah, the button that was pushed this week for me came right back down to, I was in a room full of people that saw me with absolutely no value at all in the situation. And it was coming out quite clear. So I just needed to leave that area and not be among those people that felt that way. And go vent my issue and get a grip on that. She brought out a subject, a very sensitive subject in this chapter on discrimination. She addresses incredible topics. She gets into politics too, and she addresses that, and she does it with such grace and elegance, I think, eloquence. And, it needs to be talked about, and the difference. Discrimination, bigotry, prejudice, fear, and ignorance bigotry and prejudice, all of that under discrimination is fear and ignorance based, and it is a sure sign of a monster. Whoever is displaying that behavior towards another person, their monster is up and in full action. But it is painful to be on the receiving side of that. It's incredibly painful. And so it makes it, I think, all the more difficult to step outside of that when your buttons are being pushed and you are feeling that discrimination. And let the logical side of the brain engage and be able to say, it is just fear. They just don't even understand who I am as a person. That reading that this week, I'd read it last week. We didn't get to talk about it. I reread it 2 more times this week. And I really took the opportunity this week and observed, I'm trying to recall this picture I was looking at. I think it was on Facebook when I was, yes. So we have a duplex. So right there, I am just completely letting biases take over while I look at people's Facebooks and the things that they are posting and going, is that a person I'm going to want to interact with on a regular basis? Is that somebody that I want? Will they take care of our property the way that we want it taken care of? It's a duplex. How are they going to interact with the tenants that we already have? Or will that be a situation that clashes and now we lose that tenant because they don't want these neighbors? And so I had to really, after reading this, I'm looking at pictures and I'm going, okay, why am I having that feeling about this picture and this person? And I even asked my husband on the phone, I said, okay, so on this person's Facebook were all these pictures, and I'm like, they were offensive pictures to me. So based on that, it's like, I really don't want to offer an opportunity to go any further in the application process. I don't even want to meet the person or show the duplex. And I asked him, I said, is that wrong? I said, because I have to interact with that person. I will be the lead to go to when there's problems with it, when there's rent that didn't get paid, or something's not operating correctly. If there's repairs, we do a lot of all that ourselves. Whatever could possibly crop up, I have to interact with that person. And I did. I caught myself many times going, why do I feel that way about this picture? It's just a picture. It's not their heart. It's not their soul. It's not maybe even who they really are. There's obviously a front. Anytime we put pictures out, we've posed for that. We've given what we want people to see, not what we're afraid of them seeing. We don't give our bad side. We don't show that in pictures. So yeah, we had an incredible discussion about that, my husband and I did, which was, probably in part because of what I had just read here, going, am I letting that affect who could potentially be a really great tenant and solve our problem of the fact we have a place sitting empty, not bringing any income right now? So, yeah, that I got smacked with that this week too, of having to step outside that and say, just based on, there was vulgar language, pictures, just creepy things that I think is creepy. But then we also look at the median of social media right now, and that's not outside the norm. And it's just the same thing as I said about, with how you cook a frog. They've been in that, immersed in it. As it heightens, do they really know that that's bad? And who's choosing to say it's bad? On whose scale? Whose judgment stick is that bad? So yeah, those were all the things that I stepped outside of and was like, we need to go back to facts. We offer them the opportunity to go through a background check. We look at their criminal record. We look at their credit history, eviction history. We look at all of that. And I'm like, we should let them. We should let them. And then have facts to back up whether or not anything in those pictures had anything, was it really somebody we would want to rent to? Our facts that we go on are those things, not what someone's pictures look like on Facebook. So yeah, I had to walk through that. Dr. Frankel, did you read his quote in here? Everything can be taken from a man, but one thing. Did that come from, was that from the time of concentration camps? Dr. Viktor Frankl, in his book, Man's Search for Meaning, how he endured his experience, during the Holocaust in a concentration camp. Everything can be taken from a man, but one thing. the last of human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. That took me to the verse of, is it in Old Testament? To be content in whatever situation you find yourself
That's
in.
Paul.
That's Paul.
Yeah, that's Paul. I've learned to be content.
Okay, it is Paul, but I think back to oh my gosh, it wasn't Daniel that was sold into slavery by his brothers. Joseph. Yeah. You know, he gets sold into slavery. He gets put in jail by a false accusation from Potiphar's wife. So, you know, he lives a life of finding contentment in any situation he is in.
He definitely could have. He had quite the resume as a victim, as a person who had many wrong things done against him.
Yeah.
And
chose.
yet he flourished because he chose to.
His attitude in any given circumstance. How can I make the best thing? That was also a sermon this week that I listened to called Ugly Truth. And or Ugly Trust, Ugly Trust. And in the most ugliest situation, trusting God for the next best choice. When you are in just the worst situation and nothing is a good choice, either one that's facing you. Well, what is your best choice in that situation? What is the best thing that you can do? And choosing to take the next best choice that is presented in front of you. A simple one. I mean, he got pretty deep, and I won't try to regurgitate all of that, but a really simple one is, you know, you're in a really bad living situation. Your neighbors are terrible. The house is horrible. It's falling down. The landlord doesn't care about it, and you cannot find anywhere else to rent at the moment. You are looking, there's nothing available, you can't, it's not your price range, whatever it is, it's prohibitive for you to move. And he says, so your next best choice is to do all that you can to make that home the most wonderful sanctuary for you and God to cohabitate in. What can you do to turn that in to your own sanctuary for worship, for prayer, and to just spend time where you are, be grateful that you've got a place at all until the next thing opens, and to just keep praying. And he talked about, and I'm not going to be able to pull this one out either. It was David when he was being pursued by Saul, and he's praying and praying for relief from Saul. And, you know, the Bible promises answer to our prayers. It doesn't promise them tomorrow or at the end of amen. And there were 7 years. There was just a 7-year wait before that came. And that in that space, the space between amen and answer, what can you choose to do? What is your next best choice? I mean, his was he had to go live among the Philistines, the very people that he wanted to annihilate for Saul. But the next best thing for him, for God's plan for his life to come to fruition, was to go to the Philistine and to live until God took Saul out of the picture so that David can then come back in as king. And he had multiple opportunities to just wipe Saul off the face of the earth. But he knew that it was God's timing and God's doing. And if he wanted God's blessing in his reign as king, he couldn't step outside of that. That takes some serious discipline. I'm not so sure I'm that disciplined. I don't know that I am. But what he was talking about is a space. There is that space between amen and the answer. And there can be a long space. Some people I know have waited 20-some years for that answer. There is that space. And what do you do in that space? You make the next best choice you can each day. So that's, that goes along with that. That's our one freedom, that one thing no one can take from us, the attitude that we have towards any given situation. And it's a choice. It's a daily practice, can be an hourly practice, depending on what you're going through. It can be
minute by minute.
Yes. Some days. I have one of my buttons that gets pushed is being on time. And even in getting my son to bed on time. And oh man, I can feel it just well up, and I get just snippy and frustrated, and I don't even want to do bedtime because it's such a stressor for me, because I don't have anybody else going, let's get to bed on time, and he's doing everything but what I'm asking him to do. And he said to me this week when I was like, hey, come on, get in the car, we gotta go, we're gonna be late for soccer practice. And he goes, well, do we have to be on time? And that's exactly what Kim would have probably said to me. Do you have to be on time? And I looked at him and I took a breath and I said, you know what? Nope, we don't. We do not have to be on time. He goes, but if we can, we probably should, right, Mom? And I said, yes. If we can, we should be on time. I said, why do you think we should be on time? I was curious why. He goes, well, so we don't miss instructions. I said, yeah, so you don't miss instructions. I said, someone's giving their time to teach you something. Being on time is respectful to them and showing them that it matters, that we appreciate their time. So there's a whole host of reasons why we should be on time, if we can. But no, we don't have to. We can choose to be late if we want to be late. It might hurt the other person's feelings. We may need to apologize for that. But he was absolutely right. Do we have to be on time? And it was amazing when he said that to me, that I was just like, yeah, all that tension, us surrounding about, we need to get in the car and we need to go. It just was like, it is his soccer practice, not mine. But what it reflects, am I doing a good job as a mom on getting my child around in the car? Am I organized? Am I disciplined and being the good mom? Where maybe I am being a good mom and letting him suffer the consequence of being late to practice and missing instructions, and he needs to learn that process. If I always get him there on time, does he ever experience what happens when he chooses to dink around and not be somewhere on time? That coach doesn't know that I'm trying to teach a life lesson to my son, just knows I'm late. And I let that affect me, what is perceived by that other person. I could go up to them later and say, hey, I'm sorry we're late, I was teaching a life lesson. And they'd totally get it. But I let all that swirl around me and tense me up about, we need to be on time. Same thing about bedtime. If he doesn't go to bed on time, who does it affect? As he gets older in school, who does it affect when he's falling asleep in his classes? It does not affect me. It just affects him. But we take that on. So, what's the perception? What are parents or teachers thinking of this kid who's falling asleep? Man, don't their parents need to go to bed on time? We let so much. And we have to step outside of that and stop worrying so much about what is perceived of us by everybody else. But that's that button pusher. I have value. I am good at what I do. I'm good at being a mom. So that's where it goes. Flipping over to unless something stuck out, I don't know if you guys write in your book. I'm intentionally not writing in my book so I can give it to someone else. And I've already done that. I've met people that I have kept an extra copy with me, and we'll get to talking, and I've given a book away. So I write all my notes here, but between here and page 152, anybody have notes in their books or something that stuck out to them? Anything highlighted? And it won't be on 152 in your online book version, as we've learned.
Actually, it might be. I'm looking at page 152 right now. I got to go to my spiritual director this week, which was great. and we talked a lot about gratitude.
Mm.
And there was a kind of where we ended the conversation was about what being grateful for things I can't see yet, but that I know are coming. And I think it's that in between amen and an answer.
Okay.
It's that same kind of space of,
Yes.
I know God's working. I know I will be grateful for what he does with this difficult moment. I don't know what that is yet.
Right.
But I do know that when it comes, that I'll be glad for what he's been up to in the midst of this in my heart. And so I can choose to be in a place of gratitude for whatever he's doing in this moment before I even know what it is. Because I know it's good.
Right.
And I know
yes.
it's coming.
It is good.
And it's living in that space that allows us to make choices that aren't based on my experience of this moment, but my expectation.
The expectation. Yeah. Like that. Definitely. So I have a note to read the bottom paragraph of page 152. It says, I don't think there is anyone alive who hasn't felt unjustly treated. I know there are degrees of prejudice, and our chatter tells us that others don't understand our situation. That is true in all cases. None of us know the depths of another's pain. We can't control what happens to us, but with a strong desire for peace and an increased awareness regarding the monster tracks running within ourselves and others, we can better craft our responses. This will set us on a path few are willing to go. As a result, we will see the fruit of this mindset permeate every part of our lives. And we cannot even begin to understand. We are given empathy and compassion. We've gone through situations similar to others simply so we can help them through when they go through it. But we will still never experience it the way they do. They will never experience it the way we did. As we've talked many times, things that push our buttons don't push someone else's. Things that annoy us don't annoy someone else. The things that we enjoy eating, others don't. I love olives. Somebody else doesn't like black olives. And I'm not ashamed to eat them off their plate either. We can better craft our responses. This will set us on a path that few are willing to go. That part's kind of sad to me, that few people want to change how they feel and respond to things, how that inner turmoil always stirs up, that few will go down that path of just trying to make themselves better, truly, without having to change anybody else. This says nothing about changing anyone else, and isn't that what we always are about? Oh, if they would just change, I would be happier here. If this person could just see this about themselves and change. But if we could just change our response to the fact that they're stuck in a monster track right now, that they're unaware of, because they haven't read this lovely book, if we can just view them that way and change our response. But it does kind of sadden me that there aren't more that would want to go that route. And maybe eventually we'll get there.
Yeah, there's such joy available. It's a completely different way of experiencing life. Mm-hmm. And there's such joy available to us when we get free of some of these, and not that any of us will ever be completely free, but that we get free of some of these things that cause us so much pain and anguish. When we look at these and say, it's all a lie. Like, nothing about this is real.
Right.
And when that makes sense to us, and we can just push back from it and be like, no, I'm not going to let this mess with me like that.
The monster will always live. And I made that note in the very last one when we were talking about compulsion.
It's always going to be living within you. That lie was embedded young. It's always going to be there. It's our ability, exactly, to be able to push back and to know this was a lie. This is not real. This is not who I am. This is not what is really thought about me. And, you know, that right there is what brings that joy and sets you free from that. But yeah, we'll never have ourselves rid of that monster. We can only identify it and then observe when we're feeling it awaken, get outside of it, and it's a practice. I mean, this book just sets the stage. When we read the last word on the last page, we're not healed and done. We just now have the tools to take every day, every second, minute, breath that for the rest of our lives to practice this and to work at getting better at it. And it is a practice, a daily practice, like we said a minute ago, a minute by minute practice. It's exactly that. And so, okay, so then for fun, she says, make a list of the areas where
that's so fun.
Yeah, you tend to have your buttons pushed very quickly. My guess is that you've already been thinking about those. So internal questions after taking a deep breath. What part of what happened or what was said got me the most? Why does that upset me? What am I not wanting people to know or think about me? So maybe you had your button pushed this week already and you can reflect back and do this assignment. Maybe you have to wait for your button to get pushed this week. It will. I'm sure it will. So you can either reflect back or you can wait for a fresh encounter with your button being pushed this week to do that assignment. And then the external response after maybe another deep breath, when someone says something that pushes your button unintentionally, could you respond with, interesting, you may be right, or okay. I hadn't thought about it that way. Let me think on it and we can talk more about it later. That one is so powerful. When you feel your button pushed, you're obviously not going to be able to have a great conversation at that moment because those feelings, that emotional stirring is going to keep you operating out of that amygdala. And being able to say, okay, can we talk about that later? Right now wouldn't be a good time. I need to reflect. I need to think. And some things are urgent and they can't take time. They can't wait. But if they can wait, make time to come back and circle back when you've had time to get outside of that and go, wow, why did that push that button? And what was their intention really? When someone intentionally does something that pushes your button, or if you are not sure if your button pusher was intentional or unintentional, she will share strategies in chapter 6 about storytelling to help with that. But, the gentleman, Jonathan, in the book that she talked about that had been discriminated against when going to meet a friend at his house, his was just after taking a deep breath and continually adjusting his focus from aligner to observer of the situation, what worked for him. Reacting emotionally in the moment is not a recipe for success for anyone. And I will just say, because we didn't really read that section about that fellow that had been wrongly treated when going to meet his friend at his house, it feels very unfair. You want that to be justified. You want to get, heard on that. There are going to be times your buttons get pushed and someone was clearly in the wrong and you're never going to get apologies for it. You can't force that. You can't make that happen. And I don't want to just discount any of that because we know what she's saying is adjust your focus. Go to observer. Don't align with that lie. That's for your own emotional health. It is. Does it right or wrong? No, it doesn't. You can, if you want to, go back to address how that person affected you and how that hurt you and restore that relationship if it matters. I don't know that guy cares to be friends with the rest of the neighbors, so maybe it's not important to him to do that. But if there's a relationship that's important to continue, that does have to get sorted out. You cannot just always go, out of he's dealing with his monster right now, operating out of that. I'm just not going to align with that. Okay. eventually something has to be done there, and you do have to have a conversation about it and restore the brokenness in the relationship. It's not saying that, because that would feel really unfair your whole life, although life is not fair. But I think that would get to where maybe that's not even a healthy way of functioning. If you're always, that would fall under your people pleaser, which I'd be very easy at doing, just saying, oh, okay, yep, that's your monster talking, we're just gonna excuse that and move on. That's not what this is driving at. It's how to release that emotion, that negative energy and emotion inside over something that may have been misperceived. Does that make sense there?
Yeah, the kind of sense that that we need to fix, that when something wrong has happened, that it needs to be addressed. I think we need to let that go in a lot of situations, because what it isn't going to be helpful for me, not really, and they're not going to listen. And I think this is when Jesus said things like, don't cast your pearls before swine. Like, Jesus was saying to his audience, like, recognize that there are people that can't hear you. They just can't hear what you have to say. Yeah. And when you run into that, then just step away. Right. There's no point in pursuing this that's only going to frustrate you and anger them when they're incapable of receiving what it is that you would like to bring. And this is where we get to step into that place of going the extra mile, turning the other cheek, that space of, I'm going to just release grace to you, and I'm going to keep moving on with my life, because I can't fix this issue.
Well, probably the hot term right now are toxic relationships, toxic people. There are toxic people and toxic relationships, and those would be the ones that, don't, just, you have to move away from that. Until they can work through their issues and cleanse themselves of that toxicness, they're not ever going to see what they're doing as wrong. There's never going to be a way to reconcile that relationship, and it's until they come to terms on their own with that, and that can take a long time. They might have to get pretty lonely, where they've alienated everyone in their life from them, and they find themselves completely by themselves and wondering where everybody went. And then maybe, you never know what their rock bottom is for them. So,
right.
Or whether or not you can have an intervention type of thing.
I had a really, really interesting encounter with someone this week where we were having a conversation, and they had just become aware of a destructive pattern in their life. And they were trying to get free of it and find it, some freedom from that. And about halfway through that conversation, my friend looked at me and said, "You already knew that this was a destructive pattern in my life, and you'd never talked to me about this." And I was like, "That's right." I said, "Does that make you feel bad?" And they said, "No, it makes me feel really loved because I couldn't have hurt you."
They were aware of that. Okay.
Because they're just realizing that this pattern is in their life and has been in their life for a long time and has stolen so much from them, but they have never been able to see it. And they realized in the conversation with me, you already knew about this, but you also knew that there's no way that I could have heard you. I would have just been offended by you. I would have just been mad or felt.
Well, they really had done some work on themselves then to even recognize that.
Yeah.
I thought they were going to maybe ask you, why hadn't you ever brought it to my attention?
No,
but they knew why you hadn't. That's great.
I was worried to even acknowledge, yes, I'd seen this, but I wasn't going to lie. And so I said, I saw it, and I've been praying for you about this for a long time. I mean, multiple years. Like, and so what I'm saying today is an answer to my prayers, because the Lord has finally brought you to the place where it's time to deal with this pattern and get some real freedom from it. And it was so cool. That was great.
That would be so cool.
But it was one of those moments where I'm like, man, I'm glad I never said anything. You know,
Right.
it would have been so easy for me to be like, well, you always do A, B, C, D, E.
Yeah.
You know,
Right.
and, and I didn't, thank God. and now that, you know, there's some fruit from that. But so there is, in giving people who aren't ready to deal with that, this is your monster talking to you, but I know you can't hear that. Like, you're not ready to see that. So I'm going to back off. I'm not going to confront you with it, and I'm going to trust that the Lord is at work.
Right. Yeah. Well, the Bible talks about that too. You know, it's not our job to convict. We can bring them to points of truth in Scripture, but the Holy Spirit will convict them. And we just have to pray, Lord, bring that conviction. Show them, work in their heart. He already knows what they need convicted of. We don't have to even ask him that, but we are to pray for them.
Right. And in the meantime,
show us how to love them.
The operation of their monster has been revealed to me so that I don't take it personally.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not going to be hurt by...
Right, and your friendship, your relationship can continue.
Yeah.
Because you know what they're operating under. So.
Anymore, though, people are way too tolerant of things that should not be tolerated.
Yep, I agree with that.
Just,
I agree.
In my case, there's a guy behind me. He will mow his yard every other day in the summer. And if that's not bad enough, he'll stop and start the mower 50 times. I have actually counted it. Why? And now he's got a dog.
And now,
Puts in the backyard, and it is the loudest barking dog you've ever heard in your life.
You require a lot more peace and serenity, and he's disrupting that. Wow. Have you talked to him about it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think he's, I don't know.
So there's a compulsion on his side. His grass has to be level at all times. One blade gets out and the whole yard gets it.
My next door neighbor has two of the worst barking dogs. She'll put the one little yappy one out on the front porch at 6 o'clock in the morning, every morning. I haven't slept in my own bed for 3 years because of it.
You sleep somewhere in a different room that's further away?
Get away from it. And
So-
I can still hear it.
Wow.
She doesn't care.
Choices.
The house on the other side of her was for sale for a while. A family bought it. They didn't live there a year because of it.
Well, you can't make your neighbors move, but maybe that is a consideration. Is not that that's a fun thing to do when you like your home, but it sounds like choices are for you to consider another more quiet neighborhood.
Yeah, I'm fighting my mom about that right now.
Well, shoot, Mason, we'll have to pray over that. But yeah, that means your buttons are being pushed this week for sure.
And then just last night, being Cinco de Mayo, people behind me had to have a party.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Quietness.
I just want peace and quiet. For the good of the neighborhood, for the good of society. You know, nobody cares anymore.
Yeah, that's a tough one. There's a lot of apathy. There's a lot of live your own life, do your own thing, YOLO, you only live once. There's a lack of consideration for others. I wouldn't know what we don't have neighbors, so we are fortunate. We have nothing but fields of farmland around us. Although we do have the tractors that come whenever they're ready to plow. And there is I don't know that it's a gravel operation. There is some kind of digging or something just to the south of our house on the other side of the field. And they do start in the summertime between 5:30 and 6. You will hear the bobcat fire up, and it's loading up trucks of fill dirt, sand, I don't know what. It's not a huge operation. It's not like some of the other quarries. That's the word I was looking for. Rock quarries around. It's a small thing. But you can hear, like it just comes right across the field, and our bedroom is on the south end of the house, so we hear that bright and early. And at first it used to really be disruptive because they would in the summertime even work Saturdays. So 5:30, 6 o'clock, here you hear these engines rev up, and you hear the dumping in the trucks, you hear the banging of the beds as they're dumping stuff and the beds are going back down. It's like, oh my gosh. Now I'm an early riser, so it's not horrible for me, but my husband is not, and Saturdays is one day that's like, I'm sleeping as late as I can. And so, yeah, that used to really drive me nuts. I think now we've kind of acclimated to that hum. We call it a hum now instead of the annoyance it was. But sometimes, I mean, that obviously has you pinned into a position of if you can't talk to your neighbors, if they don't care, if they don't want to change, if they're not having their parties outside of there's city ordinances. I don't know if there are county ordinances for noise levels and when it has to be quiet.
I assume there are. But
You know,
I already checked. They
No.
said there's nothing they can do unless it's at night.
at night. So, yeah, that your only option is to remove yourself from that. That doesn't seem like a most viable, easy. I don't say that tongue in cheek, but that may be something to really pray over. Where is somewhere you can move? Go looking for houses that are for sale in a much more quiet neighborhood, maybe an area of retirees that enjoy that serenity, enjoy that peace.
This house, I was so careful about that. Actually
The-
sat in the
but you-
driveway in the car with all the windows down, listening
Listening.
for any noise at different times
And then
of the
other
day.
people moved in over the years, something you could never predicted or control.
Only one has.
And brought his mower.
No.
Oh, he was already there. You just
Yeah.
didn't know about the mowing
Yeah.
habits. Okay, well now you will have to survey your neighbors
It
about
took
mowing.
me 3 years to get that house livable. It was a
Yeah.
fixer
I
upper.
remember that.
Yeah.
I do remember that. You had a lot of enjoyment. There's a lot of emotion in there. A lot of hard work to have restored the house the way you wanted it. That's not gonna be easy. Well, you definitely have your homework in front of you, stepping outside of that emotion of why those things are so disturbing to you, and maybe rewriting the story for them and for yourself. It's gonna be some work this week.
With the barking dogs, I know it's PTSD. Because the house where I used to live, the next door neighbor had 7 different outside dogs in the 14 years I lived there. They would never let them in. My house, or my room, was right on the end, right where their backyard was. They ruined my homework. I was in high school at the time. When I started working, I couldn't work because I worked at home. And they didn't care. They thought it was funny.
Yeah, we can't control how they react to that. They wouldn't understand. It's hard. They'd have to be at a place to hear the conversation and to hear how that affects. And if they're not, then yeah, that's not going to be received from them.
One of their dogs, I swear, she was 22 or 23 when she finally died.
Wow.
And they never let her in the house. I actually witnessed her barking at the fleas on her own back one time.
So just the way they take care of or lack of care bothers you. I'm sorry. Well, okay. We spent the entire hour on one chapter. Should we try to get through these other 2, or should we? If you don't have to rush off, we can try to get that quickly. I will have to cut it at 10:30. And if you can't stay online, you can come back later and finish it. But we'll try to push through these. So the all or nothing track. Found it maybe would paradoxical be kind of the right term for when she says this one is subtle, but yet we announce it with a degree of pride if we are the all or nothing. Like that the track is kind of a subtle track that you're an all or nothing person. It comes in kind of slow, but those that are all or nothing people have this degree of pride about it. It becomes destructive because it doesn't leave room. I love how she said this, for an and both scenario. There's no third option, no compromise, and then it's paralyzing. And I have dealt with people that are, and I would love to be able to dig in and find out why, but have absolutely no ability to see compromise and do it. Like, they just don't understand. Their thought of what compromise is getting it their way. That we give into what they want. But for them to give even a little our direction, they cannot do. Like, I mean, I witnessed that whole thing of someone trying to mediate a conversation between two people and help them arrive. And this other person kept saying, you know, at this point, I would just like to see your idea. What do you think would work? And they couldn't even get to that. And then it almost fell toward like an opposition defiance issue where when they gave their idea and the therapist was like, okay, she's willing to do this for a week, even though she got nothing in there. She has no skin. She didn't get any of the things that she wanted. She's willing to go all in here. This is what you've said and how you want this to function and operate. So we're going to meet back in a week. And then that person did not even do it, what they said they would. They're part of it. Not at all. And yet couldn't see that as wrong. And the other person was still just wrong. And the conflict was still there. And so when I thought about that, no third option, no ability to compromise. I've never met someone that could not kind of compromise a little, give something up. But this person truly, like so many scenarios that I sat and watched as this therapist tried to work between these two people and bring in a compromise, couldn't. There was none. Not even like, I'll give 10 when she gives 90. Wasn't there. And the therapist just said, I see no hope of this relationship being able to go forward here. I don't know how you will manage moving forward in a situation like this. With that I've never experienced that before, but when, so that the all or nothing just leaves no room for an and or both. A third option, a scenario there. And that it relates back to judgment with the right and wrong. Always, never. Definitely. Those are definitely linked. So probably if you have that as your monster track, judgment, probably this is the sister monster living next in the same part of your brain together, I would think. Choosing... And it's that feeling of if you choose one, you sacrifice the other. If you choose this, you're giving up all ground here. I think it's a power struggle, a control struggle to do that. We use it as a weapon against ourselves, living in only one of two truths. You give all or you give nothing. It's the cause of burnout and hopelessness. And I can see that. Definitely. I can see that in like the workplace. Your salesman, she talks about one of that dieting and exercise. She talked about the all or nothing. They're either all on the diet or they're off and eating everything on the bad list. Like, forget it this week. I'm just off. I'll start again Monday. Instead of, and that comes from like a guilt and a self-judgment. Oh, I fell off. I've worked in the health and wellness industry as well, and coaching and helping people meet weight goals. And we scheduled specific go off your diet days. We scheduled them because you have to have that. Or you end up in this all or nothing. You know, I'm a firm believer. I went through a Bible study years and years and years ago about healthy living, weight loss, healthy weight, all of that. You know, if we look at the Bible and take it for what it says, that God created everything and it was all good, that at the end of his creation, he sat back and he said, this is good, then there isn't anything on this earth created that we shouldn't enjoy. We just need to enjoy in moderation, not in abundance. And, you know, so if you know that you need to get healthier and you need to lose some weight and you need to eat better, the thing that I always taught was, but you also need fellowship, and all our fellowship centers around food. And there's birthdays, there's anniversaries, there's holidays. And you should not be miserable at not having your grandma's favorite apple pie at a Thanksgiving because you chose to start a diet the beginning of the month of November, so that by January you will have met your weight loss goals for your New Year's Eve gown, whatever it may be. You know, you have to allow. Gosh, that even makes me think about Lent. During Lent, Sundays we took a break. During that 6-week period, Sunday you took a break and recharged so you could go again for another 6 days. He rested on the 7th. You worked hard for 6 and you rested. I mean, just so many things there. So yeah, every 10 days is about, 10 days of really sticking to things. And then, you know what? Take a break on that 10th day. But I would also advise them, don't go overboard. Don't eat everything in the pantry that you put an X on. Be planning. What is that one thing on that 10th day? Or I guess it'd actually be 11 days because 10 days you're on. So on day 11, what is that one thing you were looking forward to? And just choose one. If you can't just choose one, okay, choose 2. But also, don't overeat it. Don't just make yourself sick with it. But the flip side of that, in that study I had done years and years ago, was, so what if you make yourself sick with it? Maybe that's what you need to do. Maybe you need to eat it to the point you puke it back up and you no longer ever desire it. And maybe you'll break yourself of that addictive desire towards it. So anyways, the all or nothing track, certainly. If you're one of those crash dieters, fad dieters, or same with exercise, it's all or nothing. I'm either going to go run the 10 miles or I'm not running any at all. Well, how about just get a mile today? Maybe your schedule doesn't allow it. Maybe it's just not a season where you can run like that right now or work out like that. Sales, people in sales, especially that are commission-driven jobs. I see that all or nothing. Your employer comes out with all these things to boost morale, to give incentives, so you'll go out there and sell. And so you dive in, and then if you come up short on your own goal, now it's nothing. And the next month, you just do nothing and your business falls apart, or you're behind on some bills now this month because you didn't make the commission. And then she talks about, like, how does that affect your family when you're in that all or nothing track, especially if it's work related. They get neglected. All you can do is work, and they just have to fend for themselves, and you'll re-engage when this is over. And she gave an example of a coworker like that. And then, like, on the nothing track, she's just in front of the TV, vegging in front of the Netflix. And I'm thinking, yet you still neglect your family if you're binging the Netflix. You still, all that guilt about how I just went all out over here and my family had no attention from me, but now I'm on the nothing track and I can do it. I'm paralyzed and sitting on the couch. The family's still over here, needing mom to engage. So either way is not healthy. I know that was my summary up through, just the first couple pages there. I stopped at the subtitle of our relationships when we apply the all or nothing. And that was kind of back to in the judgment, the always never, the all or nothing comes into the same thing, and I just had made a note to read that, but was there anything else in that that stood out.
This is definitely one that's present in my universe. Uh, there's always a mental calculation of, do I have energy for this, of no matter what it is, because I don't have all the energy. I have pretty low energy, period, especially emotionally, relationally, and so if like we're either really close and kind of spending a lot of time together, or I just don't even think to like reach out and contact people, which is terrible. It's so bad because like if you're not in my like functional world,
Right.
like then just off my radar, and it's really bad for my job because I need to be kind of like finding people.
Yeah.
And so I try and set up systems in my life to keep that from happening, but
I have
that's just not how my brain
alarms on my phone to make sure that my children that have moved out hear once a day from me, and I love them.
I have some of that too. Yeah.
Because I can get, in my track of got this going on, and it's like, oh my gosh, I haven't even said hello to my son today, or good night, or I love him, or 2 days later, I'm looking back at the last time on the text, since it will tell you it's time stamped and dated, like when you last said anything. It's like,
talk to you in 6 months.
Right. That kind of falls along a 5 too. They could totally live alone on an island, and
Yes.
they would.
9s and 5s are very, very similar in a lot of
They
ways.
would win those alone challenges.
It's for different reasons, but but
Yeah.
they're very, very, very similar.
Yeah.
And that's true with goals in my life or whatever, because I'm constantly, I will show up for things that I've decided to give energy to, and things I won't, that I've decided I don't have the energy for that. I can't be. It's really hard for me to be half in or half out. The mental equation just doesn't work, and so I'm either fully present or fully absent. I don't have a. There's not a medium.
So here's an interesting scenario: operating under an all or nothing person. So I think my husband can tend to be an all or nothing. He's not going to start a project if he knows he cannot get it done today.
Yep.
Or if he starts it, hoping he will not come in till it's done. It could be 3 or 4 in the morning. He will be out with a headlamp on, lights on. He will finish that project, miss dinner, be starving when he comes in, probably hypoglycemic, the shakes, so then in a bad mood too, but he's got it done.
Right.
And I'm like, oh my gosh, like, is he, I then assume some things too, like he's out there, it's 3 in the morning, 4 in the morning. Is he angry? Is he mad I'm not out helping? But I've over time, because I could easily fall into the all or nothing on certain things, but I will have projects. I know I need to get these projects done, but I will look at my day and go, okay, this is what I want to do today, these 5 things, and this is how much time I have to do them. And if I don't get them started, they're never going to get done. So I'm going to divide my time up among them, but it means they don't get finished, and it means it sits till I come back to it. So I will, like right now, our guest room, I was sorting out some clothes for the garage sale that didn't make it over here with the circumstances of not being home right now.
Right.
I also have grow lights I was putting together when I received the call about my son. And so the grow lights are not finished, but the plants are still growing because of the window they're sitting in front of, but they're still on the floor. So if you were to go into this guest room, it's horrifying, the mess. I also was smack in the middle of tax season, so I had files on another section of the floor in this. It's a huge room. So there was room for this. The door is shut right now. It's appalling. And I will get back to it. But I also knew it's like I have this much time for these things. And so I will divide my time up. But it means a project might get worked on Monday and might get worked on Friday. But it's not going to get done, cleaned up, put away, space clear, back to the white glove presentation. And so operating underneath someone or alongside, however you want to see that, someone who is that all or nothing, for him, it just stirs in him and causes, a lot of unrest and anxiety in him. But that transfers to me because I know how it makes him feel, but this is just how I function. And I will get back to it. And I also sit and think the amount of time that it takes me to clean this up, to resort it, putting things in different piles of stuff. But if I want it, because I didn't finish it, to put it away till I can come back to it, I sit and think about that time. Like my tax files, when I'm working on someone's taxes and I've got all this information and I've got sticky notes, I need this from them, I need that from them. If I put it all back, now I got to sort it all back out and reread my sticky notes. And I think about that time. That's 20 minutes. I could vacuum the house in 20 minutes. And that's another chore that has to get done. So it's just all of that. That's my mindset. That's the way I think. But if he and I don't have that conversation, he can't understand why I just left that room completely destroyed. And he's the kind that's like, I'm going to finish it till it's done. Yes, you can, because I'll make dinner and feed the kids. But if I finish something till it gets done, people go hungry and don't get where they need to go also. And it's just coming together, having that conversation and understanding why and how we function, and then limiting. I have learned I have to do my projects like that in a room. I can shut a door that he never goes to. So it's out of sight and out of mind for him. And other than he knows if I go upstairs, I'm going to see something I don't want to see. So he doesn't go upstairs. But then that alone kind of sits on him like, I don't enjoy half of my house. I never go in half of my house. The upper half, I never venture. And it drives him nuts. But that's that all or nothing track as well. And just sitting underneath that, I still feel that same paralyzing feelings that can come of living in an all or nothing kind of world and not seeing an and both or a compromise to things. But in my mind, the compromise is I keep it in one room and shut the door. So it doesn't invade on him. But so about relationships, I just made a note to read that. I don't know. I guess maybe I felt like I couldn't express it any better than she did. It says, all or nothing can apply to our relationships with others as well. When we label people, it is difficult for them to ever show up differently. Gosh, if you can get that statement. When you label a person in a certain way, and it's an all or nothing, they either always do this, they don't ever do this, your bloodhounds are going to do nothing but bring you the evidence to prove that, and you're never going to see that person differently. And that's going to affect how you view them, how you treat them, how you relate with them, everything. Once you have an always opinion about someone, it is difficult for that to be disproven. And you perceive your teenager son totally lazy, then the chatter will tell you, oh my gosh, never picks up his socks, never picks up his dishes, always leaves things laying around. That is all we will ever notice. And they can feel our judgment and on a subverbal, body language. They feel it. They know that's what you think of them. And when they go and clean it up, you don't notice. And this harkens back to the Wayne Dyer quote from the Mental Bloodhound chapter. When you change the way you look at people, the people you look at will change. This is either because of existing evidence that is already there, but you weren't or aren't able to see it because of your belief about them and the work of the bloodhounds, or it's because they feel a new truth emitting from you towards them. Then my personal favorite aspect of the monster track is how we can exaggerate situations in order to justify our all or nothing mindset. Wow, yeah, I'm so glad she stated that. For example, a friend of mine whose husband was notably frugal, this cracked me up, told me about a time when she wanted to give some money to a charity. When she suggested donating, this pushed his button. And he responded in his all or nothing track, saying, what are you thinking? Are we just going to give away all our money? He could not see that there could be another option. An and both option would be giving an appropriate amount, leaving plenty for bills, and saving to satisfy his financial desires. Whenever I hear myself say the words always never, I become suspicious of my own thought. In fact, I almost started this chapter wrote a book called The Third Alternative, the message of which is, there is your way, there is my way, and there is the best way. For Covey, there is an and or both option. The third alternative takes some compromise, but the end result is peace. When we question our all or nothing thinking to see the and both option in situations, it opens up our brain to other possibilities. Ideas will show up, options that might not arise without that first inquiry of how can I see the and both in this situation. This shift can bring peace. It just isn't any better stated than that. She goes on to talk about this same thing in politics and it is so true. I talked about that early on, I think, in the Always Never, and that my son and I see things or thought. He thought I was this strict Republican. I thought he was the liberal Democrat, and I really didn't claim the Republican party, not 100%, not everything. And I totally understood things in the Democratic Party that he stood for. And as we would talk, we really realized we're probably more of like an independent third party belief. And I'm probably losing all my friends out there saying that out loud. but it was so freeing when he and I sat down and had this discussion. The things that she, numbered, that like the 6 things of what were her beliefs as this Republican conservative party, and then the 6 things that she started to realize when she opened up and started to take an honest look about the Democratic side of things. She's like, wow, when you start to really look at the heart and the intention behind the stance that they take, I think honestly we're all trying to find what's good, and there isn't between the two parties. It's an all or nothing. There isn't an and both. There isn't how do we bring all these ideas together and redo it. I don't know how you redo the politics in our country other than everything is just going to implode and just be completely destroyed and start over and rebuild.
That's what we're
And I could go on with like our insurance world. I mean, that is a disaster. And yes, like it talks about in here, the Democratic Party really has this core belief that there are fundamental things that should be provided to everyone when it comes to their health care. And what would be the benefit? Gosh, if everybody had an option and to get adequate health care and be healthy, we would not have so many people maybe on disability. But then you're over here in the Republican side of things. It's like small government, get off of the Social Security, the welfare system, and quit draining that system. But yet, what are we doing to help that? What medical care are we helping? So yeah, it's a mess. So you can look at all these sides of that, and I am so glad that she was bold enough to write what she wrote on the politics and our monster and the all or nothing and the way that it has destroyed families, destroyed friendships, because we get in our track and we are right, you are wrong, it is always this way and never that, and never should be. And I think as when the election she's talking about, I think my son was probably just really coming into that voting age. Like he was finally able to vote for the first time when an election came up. And he was my son. I'm not going to let that come between us on what he views and thinks. And it was a delicate thing to talk about. And yet we approached it really well. But that's not the case everywhere. But it was eye-opening to me. It was eye-opening to him. He realized, yeah, I really don't fall 100% over here. And he didn't really fall 100% over here. And he'll be the first to tell you, yeah, there are like 2 or 3 things I really align with, but they are so important to me. That's the way I vote. I hate all these other stuff, but these are so important to me. I vote this way. And he could totally see that, yeah, and over here, these things were so important to me. I voted this way. But a lot of times it wasn't, I was not a straight Republican ballot. That was for sure. I don't think he was a straight Democratic ballot. But you know, and then there was the whole having to vote for the lesser of two evils situation. I think I remember saying that was the first time I ever came out of an election and cried. Regardless of how I voted, I cried because I didn't like having to choose a lot of what was presented for me to choose from. I sat in my car and just cried like, Lord, this was the worst choices I've made in bad or bad or whatever I felt at the time. So it was eye-opening. It was a good conversation to have. But
I also appreciated the little parentheses at the end of that section. It says, if you feel your button getting pushed right now, observe it, breathe deeply, and hang with me. Like just the acknowledging that going into this territory of conversation is probably button pushing for a lot of people. And making somebody aware of, yeah, I'll bet your button's being pushed right now.
Yeah.
This probably is not a fun conversation for you.
Yes.
So pay attention.
Yes. Pay attention. Well, and for, you know, I've never publicly said what I've just said about belief systems. So, we'll see what backlash I get out of that. You know, in a few intimate settings with a couple of friends, we've had a similar conversation.
Right. Yeah.
But 2 or 3, you know, you just quit talking about it because of the buttons it does push. And so,
and pushed buttons usually mean closed ears.
yeah.
As soon as somebody has had their button pushed, then they're not listening anymore.
Right. So yeah, I don't have anything more to add to that. Just the homework. Where is your all or nothing behavior? Where does it come out? You never stick to anything. You always quit. Never have time. Always late. Never lose weight. I always get sick. I can never do anything right. And what's driving behind that? And that's not an exhaustive list. Obviously, there's probably things you say about yourself that you know, all or nothing. Where are you all in or not at all? And where does that drive you with negative energy? It's the negative energy. There's nothing wrong with being all in if it's, and that's what she says throughout this whole thing. Some of these aren't, not every track, monster track, is a negative thing. It's the energy behind it. You can have an all in on certain things, and it's not with negative energy. Gosh, when we had our ice storm, we were all in on getting that yard cleaned up, and we worked until it was done. That wasn't a bad thing. The limbs had to be moved. They had to be cut up. They had to be, cleaned out of the yard. So that was an all or nothing. We were done. We were out there till it was done. I think 7.5, 8 hours cleaning up debris for one time. We had another round of it, like shorter instances when we got it down to a manageable amount. So yeah, and she says that frequently throughout each section, that it's not always a bad thing. It's the energy behind it. When the energy is negative energy, then you need to step out and look at what is going on. So that brings us over to compulsion. How are we? We're out of time. So we will have to hit compulsion next week. And then the last 2 tracks are fantasy and blame. And then I was hoping to do the storytelling interpretations, but maybe we'll leave that for a separate week and a chapter all on its own and not lump that with anything else. Because then we get into the final work of facing the monster and rewiring. So let's do that. Let's just focus on 8, 9, and 10 for next week. And then we will do storytelling on its own. Okay, well, thank you. Thanks for hanging in there. Going long.